Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sunday School Dropouts podcast. We are so excited to have you with us here today.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation today. This is a new person on the pod, Trisha Wilkerson, who does a lot of work with nutrition coaching and especially in the intersections of diet culture and purity culture. I'm so excited for people to hear this conversation because in my own research, I found that there is a huge correlation between the tenets of both purity culture and diet culture and the long-lasting impacts of how those two things weave together. So I think this is going to be a conversation that listeners really, really enjoy.
I'm definitely looking forward to this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we get into that, we want to just remind everybody that we do know that some of the topics we discuss in any episode can bring up feelings, emotions, and triggers that might require more processing or be too much to handle right now. So please always feel free to skip any episode or parts of episodes and come back if and when you are ready. Our goal is to help you trust your own body and lived experience so you can take what you need and leave what you don't.
And now, a message from one of our listeners. I once planned to go on a date with Jesus. The idea was to dress up and have actual dinner by myself, believing Jesus would be there with me and talk with him, I suppose. I think the belief was that you are dating Jesus until you find your husband or something. Anyway, long time ago, and it fortunately never happened because I still lived with my parents and was never alone long enough to do it. No regrets. Thanks for this memory. And now for some listener questions.
Yay.
All right, so let's see. The first one up is there a way to talk about purity culture with my family or church?
Ooh, that is a great question. I think it really depends. I think with all religion, or religious topics, it can hit so close to identity that it can automatically put up that wall of defense and feeling like I've got to defend my faith and therefore I'm defending myself. And so I do think that there's ways to talk about purity culture with your family, with your church. And I think it's in part maybe done with this recognition that it may not be something that people are super receptive. But one thing that comes to mind is and I remember this when in my apologetics classes, is that, when you share your testimony, there's not much that people can argue against, right? Because it's your story. And how are people supposed to say that didn't really happen to you or, whatever. And I remember thinking this is a solid argument, but I think the same can be true with your own experiences inside of high control religion and purity culture. When we share stories with other people, it invites maybe openness that arguments don't always invite. And so that's kind of how I've approached it is I'm going to share bits and pieces about my story more than let me tell you all the reasons that these tenets or these beliefs are wrong, because that doesn't necessarily invite conversation as much.
Yeah, no, that's fair, I think. And I agree. I think framing it from a place of sharing your story is a great way that might be perceived as less threatening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to the question of is there a way to talk about purity culture with my family or church? Yeah, I think the short answer is yes, while also recognizing that, some families and some churches may be more open to talking about it than others. And so also don't feel like a moral failure if they're completely unwilling to. That doesn't necessarily mean you did anything wrong. Unfortunately, some of those high control systems are that's not something that they're going to be open to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question, though. We have another one, too. Andrew, this one's for you to start off with. My pastor, maybe youth pastor, used to say that girls were like chewed up gum. So I'm assuming they were meaning if you had sex before marriage, you were like a piece of chewed up gum. Is this considered purity culture? What do we think about this?
Yeah, that is something. I mean,
Classic.
that is it is classic. I mean, that is yeah, I mean, purity culture, hashtag purity culture starter pack is to have a pastor say that to you. Yeah, I mean, the short answer is, gosh, yes, that is purity culture. That metaphor.
It's classic objectification. First of all, you're comparing a woman to an object of food in most cases, and that their sexuality and their virginity is also an object, that can be chewed up or something. It's such a bad analogy to begin with. But I was really struck by this because I have friends who grew up in the LDS, the Mormon faith, and, I have clients and whatnot. And they heard these same analogies. I feel like purity culture, it's not super original, depending, like all these high control religions, they use some of these same things, and it's to objectify and degrade and to get you think that your worth again is tied up in your virginity. And yeah, it's very dehumanizing. And I've probably, broken record. It's all about control. Keep these questions coming, y'all. These are great. Okay, here is another story from one of our listeners. My boyfriend, who I ended up marrying, and I had never had intercourse, nor did we ever get undressed together. But we would snuggle and get intimate together as much as we could while fully clothed. One time, my period was 5 days late, and he had me convinced that I was pregnant, like the modern day Mary. He literally drove me to the nearest Walmart so I could take a pregnancy test and prove his theory. He literally had me convinced that I was truly pregnant, and I vividly remember rehearsing speeches in my mind of how I'd break the news to his religious family. Of course, the test was negative. Oh my gosh, we have done this.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up knowing folks who thought that, that as old as like 16, 17, 18, still believing like that, like sex, because also referred to as sleeping together, was literally just sleeping in the same bed, not even doing anything other than that. Just the act of doing that alone would result in pregnancy. Yeah.
I mean, there was many times, and I was in my early 30s, where I knew that there was no intercourse that happened, but I was still terrified that whatever I had done could have maybe possibly somehow sort of gotten me pregnant. I spent an ungodly amount of money on Plan B and pregnancy tests. Thank you to purity culture.
Trisha Wilkerson is a dedicated health and wellness coach, yoga teacher, and co-founder of the Aftermath Agency. With a passion for guiding people through healing and transformation, Trisha has spent years working in churches, schools, gyms, and now supports clients as a health, wellness, and nutrition coach.
Her approach centers on caring for the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, helping individuals recover and thrive after experiences with high control environments. Trisha brings wholehearted sincerity and unreserved enthusiasm to her work, empowering others to reclaim their well-being and live authentically. Welcome, Trisha, to the Sunday School Dropouts podcast. It is so wonderful to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm excited. We have so many amazing things that we are going to get to, all things purity culture, body shame, diet culture, healing paths forward. But I think maybe to start us off, would you mind just kind of giving us a little bit of an overview of your own experience? Because I know you didn't grow up inside of high control religion, but how did you get to it? Tell us about ministry, purity culture, or how you got to this point here today.
Thank you for asking. Yeah, I didn't grow up in Christianity or religion, but I was growing up in the Bible Belt. So it was very much around me culturally.
Yes.
As a teenager is when I started working in the church, a Southern Baptist church in Southwest Missouri. In retrospect, I'm really grateful for my time in evangelicalism. It's complicated, as we all know, but it helped me process my childhood trauma in ways that I think were pretty healthy, again, in retrospect. But yeah, I started working in the church with children, and that started my ministry experience for 25 years, working with kids and women because I wasn't allowed to work with men.
Of course. Yep.
Right.
How dare we, right? Yeah.
I went to Bible college, got married at 21, moved from Missouri to Seattle. And I think the second Sunday we were here, my husband, Mike, and I were at Mars Hill Church here in Seattle. And we spent 15 years in ministry there and dropped out of all of that soon after.
Yes. I feel like we probably would have met in either life because before I moved to Nashville, I was trying to consider where I wanted to go. And Seattle was one of the places I had chosen specifically for Mars Hill Church because I was big into Mark Driscoll at the time. And it would have been at the height of like when he was really kind of on that upward swing. So in retrospect, very glad that I did not choose that. Well, I mean, Seattle would be fine. I wouldn't mind being in Seattle, but
there's still time
the Mars
for
Hill
you
piece
to come here.
Yeah. Yes, maybe soon. Yeah. But yeah, so you were involved then in ministry at Mars Hill. Is that correct?
Yeah. I did as much as I could do as a woman at Mars Hill. As
Of
a
course.
pastor's wife, I got, a free ticket to influence and lead and teach. But I couldn't, I published a book during those days, coached, counseled, did biblical counseling for the 20 years. And, as a woman, I was limited. So I couldn't be on the stage. I couldn't influence men. And it was very hush hush when guys would tell me that my book was helpful to them. I was like, oh no. Oh,
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, like having to be almost frightened that you would have, as a woman, you have an influence on a man who's not your husband, and that could somehow be seen as sinful.
yep.
Yeah, that just leads into my first question perfectly. So you've said that women's bodies are at the core of purity culture, and I was just curious if you could talk about some of the specific ways that purity culture taught you to view police or to distrust your own body.
Yeah. So I was pretty confident as a young woman with my sexuality and my appearance. And in the first year of going to church, because I'm a natural teacher and leader, I find myself in these places. I had a True Love Waits rally at my house with junior high and high school girls. And I was only a few years older than them. I was at Bible college, and I thought, well, of course I'm going to serve these young girls. And so because I'm an Enneagram 3 and I'm trying to be all things to all people and achievement oriented, yes, I dove right in to purity culture. And so I started questioning my confidence and really questioning the foundation of, I'm enough, and started noticing in the culture that women's bodies were the currency to control and be afraid of. Men were afraid of their own desires and their sexuality and, whether or not they're going to be acceptable in that space. And women were starting to notice as their bodies are changing, that men and women are judging their bodies. So purity culture became a thing to really wield as power. And I was both complicit and victimized by that.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. We probably would have been friends growing up. I'm not an Enneagram 3, but I have a strong 3 wing from my 4-ness. And so I know how like the performative piece of that in high control religion in particular was used and exploited for God's glory, quote unquote.
It was such a setup for me because I grew up with a single mom who did the best she could, but there was a lot of mental illness there and a lot of harm that I experienced. So my attachment was really anxious. And so I was scanning the culture for what I could do to get it. What could I do to get love, acceptance, belonging? And so I was, as these things set us up, to anxiously scan the culture for all the shoulds and then do them. I found my lane to perform heavily.
Yeah. I get that. And I wonder too, this idea of that you're talking about, our bodies are changing, men are noticing them, women are noticing them, noticing men noticing them, right? This idea that women can cause somebody, specifically men, to stumble, to lust, to sin. I wonder, how did teachings like that, whether that specific one or other ones from purity culture, how did that impact your own view of your body, your body image, and maybe even what you taught the girls that you were mentoring and some of the long-term consequences of that?
I think even at Mars Hill, there was just this attitude of taking care of yourself that was merging with health, merging with appearance, merging with beauty standards and the cult of thinness and all of that. And unfortunately, it's on the rise again, we find, with white supremacist kind of conservative culture. I'm grieving that because here we are again. But I think even at Mars Hill, it was highly performative and a whole lot of comparison. There was Mars Hill men, Mars Hill women, and it was a microcosm of the greater, conservative or even Christian culture of there's one way to be, and you need to look that way. And so rather than resisting and doubting and criticizing at that time, I just did it. I didn't know. I didn't know I could challenge it. So,
Yeah. I mean, as a woman, I obviously just listened to Mark Driscoll's sermons because, I mean, that was like you download them on MP3 and then I'd, listen to them. But I know that I was frequently just like living in a state of terror as I would hear him talk about the expectations for women in particular of how they were supposed to look, how they were supposed to behave. and even men to some extent, because I have brothers, and I would just remember being like, wow, these are really strict standards for the men in my life as well, but just feeling so scared that if I did not meet those standards,
Yes.
something was going to happen. Probably my husband would cheat on me, but that would
Yes.
be my fault. And
Yeah.
that it felt like that was coming directly from God through Mark Driscoll.
That's right. I think that's where the purity culture is the shame link between extreme religion and disordered eating, because you don't want to connect with the thing that is the cause for your harm. So if your body and your appearance is this thing that everyone is saying it should look like this, and now you're fearful and you're comparing your body and your appearance to all the other women around, and you're gonna be inferior unless for some reason you fit this very specific standard. You're going to feel inferior and judgmental and critical and comparing, and all that shame envelops you. And then your body is the source of that shame. Why would we want to connect with our bodies if our bodies are the thing that we're constantly judging and comparing? So then you've got the disconnection and the disembodiment and all sorts of anxious and fearful relationship to your body and food, of course. But
Yeah. No, that's such a big thing. I mean, even just like in the work that I do, of course, working with folks who've come out of those systems, like I see that a lot. So I know you work closely with women recovering from disordered eating, like you say, and body shame. How do you see purity culture teaching showing up in those struggles? But also specifically, how do you see it showing up years after the fact? Like what are the lasting impacts of that you see?
Yeah, it is really sorrowful, because time and time again, people, women specifically, but yes, men too, come into the office expecting me to give them a diet, expecting me to provide some sort of structure that holds their value and their worthiness. And almost this shock of, no, you're already good. You right now in your body are already good. Yes, let's learn new ways to relate more peacefully to your body, and even learn, food education and nutrition, but as a means of nurture, not as a means of doing something different in order to increase your value or your worth. So my whole drumbeat is, you're already good. Let's learn new ways to take better care of that already goodness. So it's more about nurture than change. So when they come in, they're so used and programmed and conditioned to be so disconnected from that nurture as some sort of invitation feels so foreign, because they're used to shame and formula. You feel like crap. Here's the formula that holds the power to increase your worth. And they know there's no formula here. Not even me. Don't put me on that. And so it's this, I think for me, as a nutritionist, trauma-informed yoga teacher, it's just my heart to be human with them and say, no, let's more address the shame in your relationship to food in your body. Because if we're just doing behavior change and we're not looking at your story and the way that you've related, and 9 times out of 10, there's been religious trauma. There's been some sort of authoritarian experience that has taken away their agency. So when they start to feel like that relief of, wait, I get to choose, I get to notice how I talk to myself and notice it with neutrality, not with judgment. It's like it changes their lives, and I'm just a journey partner in that. So
I love that. Yeah. That's really incredible. I think maybe in large part because I was socialized female growing up in these systems, like I really resonate with body shame and food issues, and as it relates to purity culture. And I wonder if you could just speak a little bit to just kind of how the culture of restriction is really amplified within spiritual communities, maybe most specifically like evangelicalism. And I'm thinking, I mean, obviously specifically around food, but there's so many other ways restriction shows up. Yeah, I can remember that being such a huge part of just like my identity. It was like all about restriction, even doing like multiple 40-day fasts over the course of like a dozen years. And it like, but that was like glorified in that environment. And by denying myself or by, cutting myself off quite literally, that was making me holier or making me more desirable in that culture. So yeah, I know that's like a long way of phrasing that question.
That makes me sad because I think it requires us to numb our desires, both sexually and even for food, and feeling good in our bodies, feeling connected to ourselves. For me, what you're saying ties to desire, because how can we restrict without identifying desire? So food is more than food. It is comfort. It is connection. It is story. It is embodiment. And so if we make ourselves inferior to some structure or system or people that are telling us you shouldn't, and it's this prescriptive, demanding thing, but they're holding out this possibility of more acceptance and more belonging, of course I'm going to restrict.
So with the desire piece, I know that I kind of trained myself, like anytime I had a want, whether that was for food or a relationship, or I wanted to wear this shirt or whatever it is, I automatically believed that the opposite is what I needed. So I couldn't trust my heart, can't trust my desires, can't trust my wants. And so I can actually assume that the opposite is probably what I should, quote unquote, have, because the heart is deceitful. And so I hear that like with the desire piece, like that wasn't even attainable, to like have a desire, whether that's a cookie or a V-neck t-shirt or, a boyfriend. Like if I wanted that, if I desired that, it meant it was wrong. And in order to have whatever truly wanted or desired, I had to disconnect from any of those bodily wants and desires.
Gosh, that is so like weaponized control in the system itself that it gaslights us, right? To completely doubt ourselves, that our core is broken and our core is sinful. So anything coming from that self, desires, it's bad. And so, right? Like in this work you keep digging and you find there's a real lack of self-trust. I can't trust my base humanity.
I absolutely see that a lot. I experienced it too, but I see it a lot. Like I've literally had folks that I work with professionally, like we might be working on something like whether it be needs or boundaries or whatever the case. And then they'll get to a point where they're like, right, like I see this is what I want, but they're like, but that's just inherently selfish. Like it's just, and then we'll kind of be at this place where I'm like, yeah, that's okay. Like, what you're explaining to me, you're framing it as selfish, like it's inherently bad. Are you causing some harm to somebody else? Are you exploiting somebody else? Like, no, you're just acknowledging this is something you want, something you care about. Like, that's okay. But it's so ingrained that no, that's not okay. That's not safe.
I'm so ingrained.
Andrew, I have a question for you. I'm putting you on the spot. Given that you grew up in Seventh-day Adventism, which has so many pronounced rules around food in particular, like how did you see this showing up? Like messages around food and body shame, desire, maybe as a observer looking in for people socialized female, but also from your own perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I know the way it showed up for me, of course, Adventist culture, for those who don't know, there's a whole health message, and it is around things like vegetarianism, and there's a lot of other aspects to it as well, but like not consuming, well, alcohol is an obvious one, but even caffeine, like this is the thing we have in common with Mormons. Yeah, you don't do coffee, except we would also say you can't do energy drinks or caffeine of any sort. It is not, I feel like I've heard from some of my Mormon friends or former Mormon friends that there's like this loophole that you can't do coffee, but you can do Red Bull. I don't know if that's entirely true, but no, we couldn't do any of that. I literally grew up viewing, like as a little kid, seeing like I used to help my mom pick up cans along the side of the road to recycle. But at any rate, all of that to say, I would literally view like a Pepsi can no different than a Budweiser can. It was all of worldly, of the devil. Like, you don't touch that. It's so, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but I mean, it was very deeply ingrained to where it was almost, for me anyway, I mean, I was very mindful of diet, what I ate, what I drank, and how that had very direct implications as to whether you were doing what God wanted you to do or not. So whether you were saved, essentially.
Do you have any lingering stories around those things that come up for you?
You mean like it's specific ways that it still shows up, like present day?
Yeah.
Truly not so much, which is kind of cool.
Great.
I think probably the ways that most recently I've noticed it show up would probably be around things like just like drinking, for example, because again, it was so strictly like you just don't do that. Like I literally did not even try alcohol until I was nearly 30 years old. And so like I had been out of the church for a while by that point, but that was still one of those lingering things where it's like, even just like, for example, turning down like the aisle in the grocery store that has beer on it was like, not only like, is it like, don't buy anything, but that whole idea of being above the appearance of evil. Like, well, what if a church member sees you and thinks that's why you're there? What kind of a witness are you being then? And so, yeah, there was a lot of stuff that I didn't really consciously think that through as I'm explaining it now, but it definitely informed how I lived my daily life. Like my autopilot was, don't go down that aisle, take the long way around. Even if what you need is like right there and you can see it, it's at the other end of the beer aisle, take the long way around. Don't walk through there because you don't know who's watching, and you don't know who you're going to be a stumbling block for, essentially.
Yeah, that was always a big thing. There was a tanning elixir that I used to make, and it had beer in it, and I would be so terrified even to just get like the smallest pack of beer, and I didn't even know what kind of beer to get, so I'd get Budweiser, which is not a good beer to put in a tanning elixir. But I was so scared that I'd like run and grab the bottle and then get out of the grocery store so nobody could see me. So I get that for sure.
Your story, of course, yeah, I know that it reflects a powerful shift from promoting complementarianism to naming its harm. And I'm just curious if you could share a little bit more about your story specifically and what helped you begin to question those gender roles that you once taught and believed in.
Yeah. So I was in college to become a pastor, and I was told early days at Mars Hill that I couldn't. And being 21, I said, okay. And I think within a month I was pregnant because it was suggested that my real ministry would be with my children. And now I don't regret motherhood, but had I not gotten that advice that I submitted to, I wouldn't have dropped out of school.
Did you go to the Mars Hill leadership saying like, I want to be a pastor, and they directly were like, absolutely not?
They knew I was in college for that. And
okay.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. And so for me, in my story, I had suppressed that memory because, all these children later and ministry and all the trauma that we went through at Mars Hill, and we moved to St. Louis right before everything imploded. I started remembering because I was now away from it. I started remembering some of the things, and, going to therapy was very helpful. But the first thing to go was questioning women in leadership, women in ministry. And I had this deep grief that arose in me of, oh, wait, I was pursuing this because this is my heart. And it's not my identity, but I find myself in these spaces, and real deep grief with the critical thinking and the skepticism and the doubting and the leaving was this grief that, yes, I'm accountable for the way I perpetuated harm in gender roles teaching. It totally was harmful. I didn't know it was harmful. I didn't know spanking was harmful. And I regret, and I've asked each of my children to forgive me, and we keep doing repair about that. The things that I've done within Christianity and belief system have deep regret about. But with each awareness is this compassion too, of knowing that, yes, it's this setup and this victimization that is also right along with the, participating in it. So I think grief, Andrew, and realizing that I lost a real part of myself in that, and denying and submitting as a woman in ministry. And then, the other things came, all the other untangling of belief and all the various doctrines that I was like, oh my gosh, and then it was, the last 10 years of all of that. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate just acknowledging like the grief, and also just that dynamic of having been harmed, but also perpetuating teachings that did that as well. Just, I don't know. That's one of those very nuanced things that I think so many of us who came out of there have experienced. And it's hard to, I don't know, it's hard to reconcile that sometimes. I mean, because even though I myself I I probably didn't get quite as far as you did, but I was going to be a pastor, and then some things happened. I did counseling instead, and here I am now, years and years and years later. But it is, yeah, it's just very interesting to be able to sit with that, and even to name that, the ways that, like you saying it for myself, like, yeah, I perpetuated quite a bit of harm with the things that I believed and taught and perpetuated. And anyway, all of that to say, I guess I don't really have a question. I just want to say I just appreciate naming that out loud, because I definitely know there are folks who struggle with that still.
I think this is part of my heart, the repair work that I'm trying to do. Not that I have to do it, because then now I have the same posture of duty and performance on the other side. Like I have to do this work in order to redeem myself. I think I'm already okay and loved, but I can't help myself wanting to help in these spaces, because this is part of the repair for me personally, is acknowledging the harm, but also acknowledging my story and the setup, and having compassion and curiosity for myself in that, and holding that tension. I'm not a victim, and wasn't the victimizer. So I'm not identified by those things. I can hold those with gentleness and nurture myself in that. So
yeah. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about some of the gender roles. We've kind of like talked about them from the beginning of purity culture, or as you were talking about purity culture. And then I'm sure they were even more cemented at Mars Hill, just because of the way that they were constantly hammered, in every single sermon. And yeah, I wonder if we could just speak to a little bit of like just how those gender roles can harm everybody, both men and women, but also people that don't fit into that nice, neat category, that aren't really recognized by church spaces. So yeah, how do you see some of those rigid gender roles harming people?
Yeah, I feel like the gender roles were really weaponized into your acceptance as a human. And at Mars Hill specifically, I'm privy to leadership conversations and the way things, people were perceived and judged behind the scenes. And I can speak to the way there was suspicion with women that worked outside the home, the way that if a woman had more teaching gifting and her husband was more passive or quiet, the way that was judged and, denied opportunities to care for people, both in counseling and group leadership and all of that. So I knew, my body knew that was unsafe to do as a woman. So there's both the explicit gender roles and the implicit. So while we were explicitly complementarian as a church, we were implicitly hierarchical for sure. It was male-centric. Men were at the top. It was God, men, women, children. Absolutely hierarchical. And women knew that, especially if you're coming from anxious attachment or stories that in your own body, life, and soul that set you up to really scan the environment again. What's my place here? And you knew you were inferior as a woman. So,
Yeah. You said that when you moved, that was kind of one of the first things that you started to untangle. But like, how did you even arrive there? Because it's a huge switch to make. Like, what kind of prompted that?
So much pain. I think so much pain and grief. Mark and Grace were our friends, and we missed them, and it was hurtful. And so some of that was very personal. And I mean, side note is, I still pray, the part of me that prays for some sort of reconciliation there someday. It's not likely.
Yeah,
I know that.
Sure.
I know that. But it's important for me to stay tender about that.
Yeah.
So I think for sure the significant grief and loss of our community and also people we loved.
Yeah.
So I think that grief is what really did it for me. It was the catalyst, right? We all need a catalyst for change and reimagining any of these things. And it was the catalyst leaving Mars Hill.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Circling back to the message behind your work, that you were already good. And I love that, by the way. But that is such a radical reframe for those that have been raised in these systems. And just kind of want to circle back to that. Like, what does that phrase mean to you? And just in light of, everything we've been talking about.
I think that it's like the vision of taking care of yourself, I think we're motivated by shame sometimes to get, action oriented, get our life in order, attack our health, our relationships, our house, or whatever. And so if we feel bad, like we're less than, sometimes shame gets shit done, right? Because we're judging ourselves, we're criticizing ourselves, and we're trying to chase better so that we can be successful and achieve. Because we're trying to silence the anxiety. But I believe love is a better motivation. If we actually look at ourselves and see something that's not working, we can say, oh, and notice with neutrality, that's not working for me. I could improve that, or I could take better care, not because it's bad, broken, or sinful or wrong, but I need to learn practically ways to better take care. So for me, it's a paradigm shift in my story, but also professionally these last several years, is if people can grasp that their goodness is what motivates them to take better care, we take good care of what we love. I mean, take any pet, child, possession. If it is highly valued, we nurture that thing. But if for some reason we think there's something wrong with it, we might ignore it, neglect it. We don't really want to pay attention to it because it makes us feel bad. But we're doing that with our bodies, our relationships, ourselves. We're looking at it and saying, not good. It kind of makes me feel like crap. And I feel like there's something broken there. We're not going to get lasting motivation that way.
I just really appreciate that reframe. And I've even seen that even outside of kind of the journey I've been on coming out of the church system that I did and whatnot, even in just the world of like secular clinical therapy, counseling and such, I've definitely seen that shift. I mean, there's like so much evidence behind that approach being so much more effective in the long term. And what I mean by that is like, it's so easy. Like, again, in secular therapy, like we have a client come in and it's like, the goal is like, okay, reduce anxiety symptoms. Of course, that's what insurance pays for, right? But the orientation is around like this negative thing that we're trying to get rid of. And like, if we can shift to this idea of, rather than orienting our energy around what we don't want and what is hurting us or what we're afraid of, like being able to like recenter around what actually really matters the most. Like what do we care about? What makes us joyful, feel alive, all of that. It's not that those other things don't matter, but it's just that what we're centering ourselves around, it like makes such a difference.
That's right.
So I just appreciate that.
Yeah. I'm curious, as you work with the clients and the people that you work with, what are some of the ways that you bridge that gap? Like knowing that so many people are coming from that shame base and getting them to even consider like you, maybe even neutral, just like you are,
Yes.
and then of course, like you are good or you are already good. But like, what are some of the ways that you help people navigate that gap?
I think we start a pretty long time of noticing with neutrality, increasing your awareness of your thoughts and your thought patterns and your behaviors and what's really going on. Because I think there's so much autopilot going on, so much numbing and just doing, eating, performing, whatever the things are that we are just ingrained, right? So it's important for me to help someone reorient with compassion and curiosity in the noticing, just have data. Like notice when you have a desire, like you were saying, Laura, a desire for the thing. What are the immediate thoughts? Oh, I shouldn't. I'll never get what I want if I do that. Or what are the immediate thoughts and feelings that come with that? And then capture those, write them down, notice patterns, notice with neutrality. Don't judge the judge. You're just noticing some of those patterns. And then that's stuff for us to work with. Then we start to notice where did those come from? Wow, you're really mean to yourself. Wow, it's really negative. Or wow, there's a lot of pressure that you exist in. So then we name those things. So it's the noticing and then it's the naming of the feelings and the thoughts and the beliefs that go with the behaviors. And then nurturing. That's my last N, is nurturing something different. I love alliteration.
I love it. Yeah.
Noticing and nurture, because people start to realize just how much shame they have with their bodies and with food, and they didn't realize before.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's beautiful. Like, accidentally on my own kind of trauma healing journey, I started with self-compassion, Kristen Neff's work around self-compassion, which is so much of what you're talking about with the
Yes.
noticing piece. And it was shocking to me. Like when I finally just was like noticing the internal dialogue,
Yes.
what was I thinking, what was I internally saying about myself? And I mean, I was pretty horrified to begin with because I was like, I would never speak to another human this way. And yet this has been going on for decades at this point as I've been navigating high control religion and all of the rules and lifestyle around that. And yeah, very, very humbling. But I will say I can speak to the power of that because, I mean, it was hard to kind of recreate some of those new thought patterns, but it was extremely life-changing. And that was 15
glad.
years ago.
I'm
And
so glad.
like, it's huge. Yeah. How I speak to myself is not even close to how it used to be.
I think there's also an intersection there of what I've noticed with clients is once they start to notice the judge and the critic there with the thoughts, they're looking at me to tell them what to do differently. And I'm like, well, wait, in comes the agency. What do you want? You know, there's a choice here. Because now I could be the next formula, the next way of should. Okay, no shame, now self-compassion. And self-compassion could be deity. It could be, you know, just another formula that someone's denying their agency and self to do this because this is trendy or this is the thing. No, it's anti-diet, you know, but anti-diet could be deity.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true. Yeah. The agency piece is absolutely key, but it can be so uncomfortable for people. If you've been used to have, you know, the external voices of being told what to do, it makes so much sense that you would look to what appears to be a healthier person to say, okay, what next? And yet that's where, as practitioners, we hold ourselves back and say,
Yes.
you tell me what's next, what feels best. And that's so
right.
powerful, even though it's uncomfortable at first.
Yes, it is. It's so hard. So hard.
So in light of just specifically what we're talking about, autonomy, agency, because I think those are really important themes, I'm curious, how does reconnecting with our body shift our relationship to spirituality or to God? And especially with the idea of autonomy in mind too. I'm just really curious your thoughts on that.
I've witnessed people being very scared to reconnect with their body. Just a real numb experience of what is it even? It just seems so theoretical. They don't know what that means. And so, you know, things like breath work and restorative yoga are really gentle ways of kind of re-entering that, whether it's like verbalizing the experience or kind of gently guiding someone into that. I just think it can be really scary to do that. So gentleness is really important to me.
You make a really good statement when you say some people are, it's like so daunting to even kind of approach body work in general. Why do you think that is? I mean, I know how high control religion really causes us to be disembodied, but I've encountered this in my work too, just like this real fear around being in my body or even approaching my body with self-compassion or even neutrality. And it feels so scary.
Yeah. I talk to people about like, if you have a family member that's really toxic and you think they're always going to harm you, and you've experienced abuse from them, you don't want to connect with them. Yeah. And our bodies hold that kind of, it's a placeholder for disconnection and shame. And getting reacquainted and befriending our bodies is hard work. We have to rewrite the script of, no, it's okay. I am safe. And so it's just practice.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can hold so much anxiety.
It is. One thing I've noticed that's resonated with some folks I've worked with, and that's just this idea that like shame really, like the shame that can create those almost freeze responses or make it feel very unsafe to be feeling present in your body. Just recognizing how it's like, yeah, these are actual nervous system responses. Like you're not just, you're not going crazy, to quote like someone who I've worked with before. They're like, they like, it's a real thing. And like, it doesn't feel safe. Like I get it. And so, yeah, I just appreciate validating folks who it is a real struggle, especially if you've never done it.
That's right. Yeah.
the next question, relating still to that, of course, is just for women who are still tangled up in the guilt around their bodies or desires, what is one gentle invitation you'd offer them today?
I think, back to the noticing in culture, what are they consuming that is shaping their view of their bodies, and thinking critically about that, not throwing it away or now shaming that and judging that, but holding it and with a tenderness about yourself, like, is this affecting me to be on social media or to have this kind of influence or these kinds of books or whatever? Am I kind of setting myself up for continuing down this path of, a negative or anxious view of self or body? Because some women all genders may need to take a break from those kinds of inputs. And it might not be forever, but I think in the noticing the impact of those influences can help to become more aware of the shaping influences,
Yeah, I think it's so helpful. Just the awareness piece, it sounds so simple, but it has to be where we start in so many areas, right? We can't change the things that we're not aware of. And though it can be painful to be like, oh, I'm aware of this thing or that I do or this thought that I have constantly, it's such a powerful thing, right? It is such a perfect starting point in so many ways. And even in somatic work, it's about noticing, right? Like, it's not just this cognitive thing. Like, even when we're working in the body, it's about noticing what's happening in our bodies. And so it makes a lot of sense that this is where we'd want to start.
And I think a lot of us need permission to do that.
Yeah.
Because we're just automatic about these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So permission and invitation to lean in and notice. It's really hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I appreciate also what you mentioned. I forgot exactly how you said it, so this may be a bad paraphrase, but the idea that, like, noticing how you feel when you're engaging with certain things and being curious about that. But even if it's like you feel very distressed or overwhelmed or whatever, like, don't necessarily throw that out either. Just be curious and see if you can approach it with that neutrality and curiosity. And yeah, I just think that is a very helpful thing, because I can imagine how it could definitely be like this pendulum swing of, like, say, for example, I'll use social media as an example just because it's a good example. Like, I'm noticing, like, that, okay, I'm always, like, feeling agitated after I've been scrolling social media for a while. It would be very easy then to pathologize social media use and be like, I'm never going to get on any of that. I'm going to delete all of my social media apps.
That's right.
And now suddenly that's become, like, my new thing. And, and it's like, but in doing that, even, it's like I've kind of just tossed all curiosity and flexibility and holding things with lightness, right?
Yes.
I've cast that aside all over again, even though,
That's right.
I am trying to get away from something that's maybe causing me harm, but now I'm rigidly doing this other thing. So I don't know, it's
switching
just interesting.
sides.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One side of the pendulum or the other. I totally, I resonate with that big time. It feels like it would be safer. Okay, social media makes me anxious. We just don't do social media, rather than learning how to sit with discomfort and use that as information of what our next steps need to be from a place of value versus just cut off or compartmentalization.
Which makes me think about, like, the meta view of some of the things we're talking about is Christianity did not teach me how to do it, like, self-work or self-investigation like this at all.
Yeah.
Because the self is sinful. And so why would I want to do all this exploration and investigation and curiosity into my inner workings? And if I did any biblical counseling, both receiving and giving, it's only so I'm a better worshiper of God. It's not to heal myself as a human. So even that, I did not learn to do this stuff.
It still is spiritual bypassing when you say this thing that's wrong, whatever it is. I'm too anxious. I'm not reading my Bible enough. It still is just a sin issue. So that's really as far down as you need to excavate, because if your heart is, deceitful above all things, that's it. Like, okay, there's your answer, but then you're cutting off from so much more of, like, both information, but, like, goodness and hopefulness and healing. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. And it makes a lot of sense why people coming out of high control religion are like feeling like, oh my gosh, this is going to take years to get through because none of us have ever been able to do it. And it doesn't
That's
always
right.
take years and decades and whatever. We don't have to be in deep therapy work for all that time. But yeah, when you've never had an opportunity to explore beneath your sinfulness, there's a lot there.
And I would say food, our relationship to food is this vulnerable symbol of how we relate to ourselves. It's at least what
Yeah.
I'm finding in my space
Yeah.
is there's nothing more vulnerable than talking about people's eating. Because it's like this example or symbol of how we relate to ourselves. We're either intuitive, aware, and consistent, or we're neglectful sometimes, or skipping, or afraid, or anxious about. So how we relate to ourselves, is it coming from a place of nurture and abundance and awareness and connection? Or is it coming from a place of disconnect, numb, neglect? Food is that symbol. And I think it's interesting what people start to discover about themselves when we take a deeper look at the relationship to food.
It's interesting. I have a lot of clients and friends and, just people in my life using GLP-1s and right, wrong, or otherwise. Like, that's not what I'm getting at. But what they've noticed is with the absence of the food noise, like they've seen all this other stuff that has been there, but not able to be addressed because food and the food noise has been taking up that spot in their brain, in their emotions, in their bodies. So with that volume turned down, now all of a sudden they're going, hey, here's these family dynamics, or here's these issues within my relationships, or spirituality, or, I have one client who like all of a sudden was like, I have got to dig into this high control religion stuff because I'm like, now that this volume is turned down, I'm seeing all of this other stuff that has been disconnecting me from, or that I've been able to focus on that instead of these other things, which has been fascinating. I've loved being able to almost like clear the clutter and like go straight in.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is. It's the food piece because it's in that case disconnecting. It's silencing other pieces.
That's
it becomes something else to focus on rather than some other deeper things that are going on.
And that's absolutely a gift, like to be able to have that noise lower. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it does lead towards, I've had many clients where they've just been able to then also look at increasing compassion and look at how do I view myself? How do I, adjust the image I have of my body in order to truly love myself? So one of my clients says, it's about the weight, but it's not about the weight. Like, and I was like, thank you. You're getting it. That's awesome.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Reflecting on everything we've been saying for the past, I don't know, half hour, 45 minutes or so, it's just where it's really striking me is just how what is happening now versus those old systems that we might be healing from is just simply that the locus of control has changed. It's not external, it's internal now. And if you've never had that before, that feels incredibly unsettling, which makes sense why then we may, like, somebody may rationally, like, say, deconstruct or deconvert or whatever word you want to call it. Like, I may leave a particular church and then I may work with someone like you. And then it's very easy to still be like, okay, look, I left that place. I'm trying to heal from it. I don't know what to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But paradoxically, that's defeating the whole purpose of how we're going to heal. So just reflecting and appreciating everything. So,
yeah, I love that. Well, this has been a really great conversation. So as we wrap up, I have just kind of a few questions for you. And this is one that we kind of ask everybody. But like, if you could go back and say one thing to your younger self. So maybe the self that was teaching true love weights or biblical womanhood, chasing perfection, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, that makes me think about regret. Like, do we regret? Because I think I would have to have regret to say something different, because I feel like it was inevitable. I was going to do those things.
Sure.
Yeah. I think question and doubt, befriend those things sooner.
I love that.
I don't lose my grounding or myself in that, but I think I waited too long to question and doubt those structures and systems that I was in.
Yeah. So almost like trusting that you can question and doubt.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I hear you
Yeah.
saying it underneath that. Like I was doing that. I just didn't let myself do it, which I
Yep.
totally resonate with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that.
I love that.
Well, I'm curious, what gives you hope or about how the purity culture conversation is shifting, especially for women reclaiming their bodies and their worth?
I feel like women and women's wisdom is getting more attention, and the wisdom that we have to offer about not toxic femininity. I'm not saying that, but just what it looks like to offer those wisdom and connections to ourselves and one another. I think it's been a good turn, at least in the spaces that I'm aware of. There's more compassion, more curiosity, more willingness to bear the weight and be inquisitive about ourselves, and that gives me hope.
And it goes right with what you were saying, like ask questions. That's being inquisitive. I love that. So just from your estimation, what do you think that churches or even spiritual communities can begin to do to start to or help to repair some of the harm that they've caused to women's bodies, self-worth, and ultimately their freedom?
It'd be awesome if churches would pay for therapy.
Oh my gosh, yes. I agree.
And, yoga for me has been a huge tool of healing and freedom.
Yeah.
So I think being able to have somatic mind, body, soul connection, just basic teaching and support around those things where we're not siloing these things and experiences or we're trying to integrate and connect. I wish that churches and spiritual communities would get more education and know and take responsibility for helping people heal in those places.
Yeah. I fully agree. Yeah. And if there's any churches that want to sponsor, clients or, whatever, we love to have those conversations because
That's
that
right.
would be nice.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, just quick little sidebar, I actually have known of someone who, long story short, we worked on actually kind of doing some work of repair with a former church of theirs because the church actually showed that it looked like they were actually putting out some good faith efforts that they were open to. That I'm not saying to approach every church someone's come from, because obviously many churches don't do this, but long story short, yeah, they paid for therapy, a lot of it.
Wow.
That's wonderful.
That's incredible.
I know it's maybe a bit of an outlier, but also it's a glimmer. Like, it makes me hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that's hopeful. I hope that becomes more caught on.
Yeah, me too. Well, okay. So Trisha, you are the co-founder of the Aftermath Agency. Can you share a little bit about what that is and where people can go to find you if they want to work with you?
Yes, thank you. Almost 2 years ago, I was invited to build this agency. It's a collaborative care organization. We offer therapy, nutrition coaching, all sorts of practitioners offering care in these places of aftermath change, high stress. So yeah, it's here in Edmonds, Washington, but we also do support groups online. So you
love
can
that.
find us there too.
Yeah. And where can people find you or the Aftermath Agency?
The aftermathagency.com.
Love it. Love it. We'll have that in the show notes for people.
Awesome.
Awesome. And then before we're done, you do have a book that is going to come out at some point,
Yes.
and it's called
Yes.
Already Good. So I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about your book and kind of what it's about and what we can be expecting so that whenever it's available for pre-order, we can all jump on it.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, my story is woven in there, having, participated in evangelical fundamentalism ministry as a pastor's wife is there. So my story growing up and in ministry is there, but also professionally, my deep passion to help people heal and transform their relationships to food and their bodies, which is also translating to themselves because of the harm of spiritual trauma, but also diet culture. And so as we're talking today, purity culture, I think, is the link between those two as we take on the shame in our bodies. So Already Good is my hope and invitation that people can reconnect peacefully to their bodies and start to offer nurture to themselves.
I love that. That's awesome. I'm so excited to read it. And so, yes,
you.
whenever it's available, I will be ordering. That's for sure. So,
Thanks.
yeah. Well, I am really glad that you joined us today. This is such a lovely conversation. I think it's so necessary. Like I said earlier, I'm fascinated with the intersections of, high control religion, diet culture, and purity culture. I think there is so much overlap that's not being talked about. And this is just like tip of the iceberg, what we've talked about today, but hopefully can lead to more conversations and people feeling like there is support out there, if and when they are ready to work with somebody, including yourself.
Thank you. I would love that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you again to Trisha for joining us for such a wonderful conversation. Make sure that you go and follow Trisha's work. And if you're interested in working with her, you can check out how to get in touch with her in the show notes. So with that, all God's people said, amen.
Amen.